The observation deck of the Terran forward base Epsilon hummed with the low thrum of artificial gravity generators, a sound that had become as familiar to Kevin as his own heartbeat. He stood at attention, his pulse rifle mag-locked to his back, watching the diplomatic shuttle descend through the crimson atmosphere of Zarthan Prime. 3 years into the human-Zarthan conflict, and this was the first time either side had agreed to talk. Kevin didn't trust it. "At ease, Corporal," Commander Pierce said, her eyes never leaving the viewport. "Remember, this is a humanitarian mission. The Queen's child needs medical attention we can provide. We're not soldiers today, we're caregivers." Kevin's jaw tightened. He'd lost half his unit to Zarthan plasma weapons on Io. The memory of their screams still woke him at night, but orders were orders. The shuttle docked with a pressurized hiss. When the airlock cycled open, Kevin's breath caught in his throat. Queen Jariel was exactly as the intelligence briefings described, 3 meters tall, with obsidian exoskeletal plating that caught the station's lights like shattered starlight. Her 6 limbs moved with predatory grace, and her compound eyes gleamed with an intelligence that made Kevin's instincts scream danger. She carried something wrapped in what appeared to be silk-like webbing. Behind her, a single royal guard stood, weapons clearly visible but not raised. "Queen Jariel," Commander Pierce said, stepping forward with carefully rehearsed diplomatic gestures. "Welcome to Forward Base Epsilon. We're prepared to provide medical care for the young one." The Queen's mandibles clicked in a pattern the translation matrix rendered as hesitant speech. "The larva is dying. Your species has medical technology we do not. I come, with hope and humiliation both." She unwrapped the bundle with surprising tenderness. Inside was a creature roughly the size of a human infant, pale and soft where adult Zarthan were dark and armored. It trembled, its own smaller mandibles barely moving. Bioluminescent patterns along its body flickered erratically, a sign of severe distress, according to the xenobiology reports. "Corporal Kevin," Commander Pierce said, "you're our xenobiology specialist. Assess the child." Kevin's stomach churned. He'd studied Zarthan anatomy to better kill them, not save them, but he approached, his movements slow and deliberate. The Queen's eyes tracked him with laser focus, her guard's weapon hand twitching. He activated his medical scanner, running it over the larva. The data that streamed across his neural implant was grim. "Respiratory distress, Commander. The atmosphere here is too oxygen-rich for Zarthan physiology at this developmental stage. There's also evidence of a bacterial infection in what appears to be its primary digestive system." "Can we help?" Pierce asked. Kevin studied the readouts, his mind racing through 3 years of combat medical training and 6 months of xenobiology courses he'd taken during the ceasefire. "Yes, ma'am, but it'll require round-the-clock monitoring. Someone will need to stay with the child in a modified atmosphere chamber. The treatment regimen is complex. Wrong dosage of antibiotics could be fatal given the differences in cellular structure. Assign a medical team." "With respect, Commander, we don't have anyone qualified. I'm the only person on this station who's completed the xenobiology certification." Kevin swallowed hard. "It has to be me." The Queen's translator crackled. "You, a warrior who has killed my people, will tend my child." Kevin met those alien eyes. "Yes, Your Majesty, because a child shouldn't die for the mistakes of adults." For a long moment, silence stretched across the observation deck. Then the Queen extended her upper limbs, offering the trembling larva. "Then I entrust you with my greatest treasure, human. Know that if you fail, intentionally or otherwise, this war will never end." Kevin took the child with steady hands, feeling its unexpected warmth through his gloves. "I understand." The first 72 hours were brutal. Kevin had set up a modified habitat in Medical Bay 3, carefully calibrating the atmosphere to match pre-war Zarthan specifications. The larva, the Queen had called it Shickle, which the translator rendered as Dawnbringer. required feeding every 4 hours with a nutrient paste Kevin had to synthesize from the station's limited xenobiological supplies. The antibiotic regimen was a nightmare of precision. Too little, and the infection would spread to Schickel's nascent respiratory systems. Too much, and it would kill the beneficial bacteria the Zarthan needed for digestion. Kevin cross-referenced every dosage 3 times, his eyes burning from lack of sleep. On the second night, Schickel's bioluminescence dimmed to almost nothing. Panic clawed at Kevin's chest. He ran diagnostic after diagnostic, finally discovering that the child was hypothermic. Adult Zarthan could regulate their temperature, but larvae apparently couldn't. Kevin didn't have heating equipment rated for the modified atmosphere, but he had himself. He stripped off his uniform jacket, wrapped it around Schickel, and held the child against his chest, using his own body heat as a warming mechanism. He sat like that for 6 hours, monitoring the child's vital signs on his datapad while slowly rocking in place, a motion he barely realized he was doing. When Schickel's bioluminescence brightened again and the trembling stopped, Kevin felt something crack open in his chest, a feeling he'd thought the war had killed. By day 5, Schickel was stable enough that Kevin could sleep in 3-hour shifts. He found himself talking to the child during feeding times, his voice soft in the modified habitat's strange acoustics. "You know, Schickel, your people and mine aren't so different. We both want to survive, to protect our families, to see our children grow up." He carefully administered the nutrient paste, watching the child's mandibles work. "I wonder if your mother is worried. I bet she is. My mother used to worry about me all the time before." He trailed off, not wanting to finish that sentence. Schickel made a clicking sound, not distress, but something that resembled curiosity. Kevin pulled up educational files on his datapad, showing images of Earth, of oceans and forests. "This is where I'm from. It's nothing like Zarthan Prime, I'm sure, but it's home." He scrolled through pictures of his family, his voice thick. "That's my little sister. She'd be about your developmental age if you were human. I haven't seen her in 3 years." The child's smaller eyes. Kevin had learned that larvae had 12 eyes instead of the adult's compound arrangement, seemed to focus on the images with fascination. Over the following days, Kevin developed a routine: feeding, medication, monitoring, and talking. He told Schickel stories about Earth, about growing up in New Seattle, about his decision to join the Colonial Defense Force. He played music, carefully selected pieces that wouldn't distress the child's different auditory processing. Something unexpected happened. Schickel began responding to Kevin's voice, the bioluminescent patterns along the larva's body pulsing in rhythm with his speech. When Kevin entered the habitat in the morning, those patterns brightened. When he left for his brief rest periods, they dimmed. Dr. Chen, the station's xenobiologist, observed this during a check-in. "Corporal, I think the child is bonding with you." Zarthan larvae imprint on their primary caregiver, usually a parent or designated tender. The bioluminescent response is a sign of attachment and trust. Kevin felt his chest tighten. "Is that a problem?" "Medically, no. Diplomatically," Dr. Chen shrugged. "That's above my pay grade." On day 14, Queen Jariel returned. Kevin stood in the observation area outside the habitat, Schickel resting in his arms. The child had gained weight, the bioluminescence was steady and bright, and all medical indicators showed complete recovery. The Queen approached the transparent barrier, her movement stiff with something Kevin's translator couldn't quite capture: surprise, wonder. "You have succeeded, human warrior," she said, her voice carrying harmonics of disbelief. "My child lives, more than lives, thrives." Schickel responded, "Well, to treatment, Your Majesty. The infection is cleared, and I've prepared a detailed care plan for the transition back to Zarthan atmosphere." Kevin's voice was professional, but his arms tightened slightly around the child. The Queen tilted her head, studying them. "How did you manage such dedication? You, who have lost companions to my people's weapons." Kievan looked down at Schickel, whose eyes were all focused on him, bioluminescence pulsing in that now familiar pattern. "Because Schickel isn't a soldier, Your Majesty. This child never hurt anyone, and I realized, if I let my hatred extend to innocence, I become the monster I thought I was fighting against." The Queen was silent for a long moment. Then she made a gesture Kievan had never seen, lowering her front limbs until they nearly touched the ground, a sign of profound respect in Zarthan culture. "I came here desperate, expecting competent but cold care. Instead, I find," she paused, "the medical staff tell me you have barely slept, that you held my child through the worst of the illness, sharing your own warmth, that you speak to Schickel as one would to their own offspring." Kievan felt heat rise to his face. "I did what was necessary." "No," the Queen's interruption was sharp. "You did far more. I have observed the recordings. I have seen how my child responds to you with trust, with joy, with the bond that should exist between parent and offspring." She straightened, her eyes never leaving his. "Human Kievan, I make a request that my advisors will call madness." Kievan's heart hammered. "Your Majesty." "Be Schickel's father." The words hung in the recycled air of the station like a suspended sentence. Behind the Queen, her guard's weapon hand froze mid-motion. In the command center, Kievan could see Commander Pierce's jaw drop through the observation window. What?" Kievan stammered. The Queen's mandibles clicked in what the translator rendered as sad determination. "The war has taken my mate. I am Queen. I cannot provide the constant care a larva needs while leading my people through this conflict. Schickel needs a parent who can be present, who understands their needs, who," she gestured at them, "who already loves them. This is clear in every gesture you make." Kievan looked down at Schickel, who chirped softly and pulsed with warm golden light. 2 weeks ago, he would have said this was impossible. Now, holding this small life he'd fought to save, he couldn't imagine letting go. "Your Majesty, I'm human. I don't know your culture, your traditions." "You will learn, I will teach you." The Queen's voice carried unexpected warmth. "And perhaps, human Kievan, in learning to raise a Zarthan child, you will help build a bridge between our species. Perhaps Schickel, raised knowing both worlds, will be the hope we need for peace." Kievan felt tears prick his eyes. He thought of his own family light years away. He thought of his fallen comrades. He thought of all the children, human and Zarthan, who would die if this war continued. Then he looked at Schickel and saw the future. "I accept, Your Majesty. I'll be Schickel's father." The Queen stepped forward, and for the first time in recorded history, a Zarthan royal touched a human in affection, her limb gentle against Kievan's shoulder. "Then know this, Kievan, father of Schickel, you are under my personal protection. Harm to you is harm to the royal line, and when this war ends, as it must, you will have honored place in both our worlds." As station personnel scrambled to process this unprecedented development, Kievan simply held his child close and whispered, "I've got you, Schickel. I promise. I've got you." The larva's bioluminescence pulsed bright as a star. Epilogue. 5 years later, the human Zarthan Accords would be signed on Forward Base Epsilon, now renamed Unity Station. At the ceremony, a young Zarthan child with unusual facility in both languages would stand between a human man and a Zarthan queen, their family a living symbol of what was possible when enemies chose understanding over hatred. But that night in the habitat that had become home, Kievan simply read Schickel a bedtime story, one that began once upon a time, on a planet called Earth, and marveled at the strange and wonderful path his life had taken. Some bonds, he had learned, transcended species, and sometimes the best way to end a war was to love what you'd been taught to hate. The end.